Ukrainian forces have invaded the Russian territory of Kursk. Just why would they choose to do so? What's the advantage for Ukraine? And what is their strategy? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. Let's talk about it. Okay, so this is a breaking story. Supposedly at 8 a.m. Moscow time, Ukraine has invaded Kursk, the Russian oblast, with around 300 fighters from the 22nd Brigade, supported by 11 tanks and more than 20 armored fighting vehicles. We've also seen footage of Sukhoi's fixed-wing aircraft providing close air support. So there is a lot of evidence that this is a combined arms effort by the Ukrainian forces into Kursk, right? This has been confirmed, of course, by the governor of Russia's Kursk Oblast, saying that the Ukrainian military tried to break into the territory on August 6th. And it borders, of course, Ukraine's Sumy Oblast. But there is different information about the amount of progress being made, but Russia, of course, is likely going to simply just lie through their teeth, whereas Ukraine will more likely say very little, regardless of how this operation plays out. But when we look at the map, you can kind of get a sense of how this might go and why. You can see here is Kursk Oblast. This is notable because it's one of the routes that Russia took in their initial drive towards Kyiv in the invasion 2 years ago. Now, Kursk itself does not hold any incredibly special value. What the value is, and you know what, before we talk about kind of my overall thesis about why this was a strategic choice by the Ukrainian command, I want to talk about two things. The first of which, you guys know that Ukraine Aid Ops is the charity that I partner with. They raise funds for individual units, and they are actually fundraising for the drone battalion within the 22nd Mechanized Brigade. These guys are fighting right now in Kursk. In fact, oddly enough, this donation campaign dropped before it was announced that the 22nd was in Kursk. They just said, hey, they actually just DM'd me 2 days ago and said, hey, by the way, we're raising funds for the 22nd with no context. But we now know that these guys are going after it in Kursk Oblast. So I'm going to throw a link in the description if you want to support these guys. As always, they're really good about, one, the fact they're 501c3, so they're tax deductible, but also they're really transparent and about what the funding goes for. You can see literally they're asking for FPV drones, I think this is a misspelling. I think this is a Mavic 30T drone, as well as EcoFlows, which are batteries, generators, Starlinks, drone jammers, and signal repeaters. You guys know that we actually heard from the Liut Brigade, who we did a fundraiser for 2 months ago, that one of their drone jammers bricked 3 consecutive Russian FPVs, saving the lives of several troops. So you guys know that you really do make a difference. Again, I'm going to throw the link in the description, and you can check the wall, right? I'm going to do my donation here in just a few minutes when we finish this video. So you'll be able to see that I'm putting it up in there too. So again, now let's talk about why they would choose to do this. What is the strategic thinking here? Well, the answer, I think, is twofold. The first and most pressing answer is diverting Russian forces from Donetsk Oblast. We know that Russian forces have actually made some fairly substantive advances, both in this the Pokrovsk axis, somewhere where the Ukrainian forces have struggled to slow the Russian advance. Purportedly, there's even better trained Russian troops here, enough that it's unusually and noted by the Ukrainian forces that these Russian troops seem to be much more proficient in combat operations than the typical kind of meat waves that we've seen up until this point. There's also been very intense fighting moving towards Toretsk, and you can see that Russian forces advancing both towards Toretsk from the south and from the east, sort of squeezing the town on both sides. In fact, reportedly, several Ukrainian forces have been ordered to withdraw from this kind of pocket here to avoid encirclement and to ensure that the defensive line at Turretsk is as reinforced as possible. And you guys know that we just last month did our fundraiser for the 122nd who's fighting in Turretsk. So you get a sense that the Ukrainians really have a lot going on here and a lot of different directions. But what I think is most important is that these troops, one of the reasons they can be concentrated here, where Russia can throw all these troops in, is that they know or believe that they don't need to have a significant troop contingent on the border. And this isn't the case for Ukraine, who has to defend their entire border from Russia, but up until just a few months ago, Russia could simply say, listen, there's no chance their Western partners won't let them conduct operations on Russian territory. So we need only a minor contingent of our forces guarding this border. And that allows Russia to put more and more of their forces into these kind of big offensive efforts in the east. And so some of this is just keeping Russia honest, saying, hey, listen, don't try to push don't try to just simply clear out these areas. We still reserve the right to invade you right back. I don't know how else to put it. Now, 300 troops is not going to seize significant parts of Russian territory, and the fact is that the reason this is such a surprise for Russia is likely because it was a relatively small contingent, right? If Ukraine was launching a larger attack, they would have massed more forces, and Russia probably would have detected it, right? That's generally how these things go. That's one of the reasons why there was such limited success when Russia attempted the same thing towards Kharkiv, right? They got only a few kilometers into Ukraine, and only that was because the Ukrainians couldn't hit the growing Russian army on the other side of the border. But there's another strategic objective here, and that is if they're successful. If Ukraine proves successful and able to not just take territory, but hold territory here, then what you may see is actually a improved negotiating position for Russia. Because when they sit down at a negotiating table now, Ukraine has not a ton of leverage over Russia, right? They can threaten to continue strikes against Russian oil refinery. They can, of course, threaten to continue operations against the Russian military, but Ukraine has been focused on defensive operations for some time now. And so for Russia, they say, listen, we control your territory, and you have very limited sticks, so to speak, to negotiate with. And so Ukraine may be saying, listen, if Russia really doesn't want to hold Kursk Oblast, we may hold some of this territory simply for negotiation, right? To sit there and go, hey, if you want to get your territory in Kursk back, you have to yield some territory in the east, right? And that negotiating tactic would actually put Ukraine in a way more favorable position at the negotiating table. Because again, they don't have any long-term interest in holding Kursk Oblast, but they may sit there and say, okay, but we want you to withdraw entirely from Luhansk in exchange for Kursk, right? So you see how that can really improve the Ukrainian negotiating position if this is successful. And it may be a case of if this 300-person effort proves successful, then they may double down and gradually ramp up the attack over time, not unlike how we're seeing how Russia seemed to operate in the Donetsk region. Final note, guys, if you want to see some of the early footage coming out of Kursk, that is available for members on Combat Vet News. I can't show combat footage on this channel on YouTube, so that goes on Combat Vet News. And we did a deep dive into some of the forces deployed, into what we're seeing, into even some of the screenshots of Telegram messages that the Russian armed forces are receiving about Ukrainian operations in the region. So again, if you want to keep me independent, keep me able to do this every single day for you guys, you could check us out at combatvetnews.com. The link is in the description. Specialist tier is going to get you those members-only videos twice a week, uncensored combat footage. I mean, this stuff is like 6 hours old. And of course, Lieutenant tier, Get you all that plus the Q&A videos and shout outs. And then Colonel tier, you get the by name shout outs, right? For the people who are really here to support and step up for the channel. So that link is in the description as well. Thank you guys. Thanks for everything. And a huge thank you to our Colonel tier members, particularly James Jerling, Steve Moran, Doug Beck, Alan Knutson, Bastian Hemmerling, Yanko Georgiev, and all of our Lieutenant tier folks. I could not do this without you guys. I appreciate you so much, and I will see you in the next one. Cheers.